Salaried Staffs Association, the Transport Union, is coming up for grabs soon. And for us on the left, it's an important trade union role. So we want to know who the candidate to back will be. Well, let me introduce him to you. TSSA Representative Barry James. Thank you for joining me tonight. How are you, sir?
Thank you very much, Damon. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
You're more than welcome. Great to meet you, Barry. As I said at the start, you're being hailed as the left contender in this presidential contest. Perhaps you'd like to tell us a little bit about your left credentials, a bit about yourself, your political education and background, so the audience can get an idea of where you're coming from.
Okay, so yeah, I grew up in working class family in northwest London. Wasn't particularly political at all. Went through school and college. Eventually joined the London Underground when I was 22. In London Underground, you soon get unionised.
Of course.
Spoke to a lot of RMT reps and TSSA reps, and really brought into it. Worked my way up to become station supervisor at King's Cross.
Cool.
Where the underground during that time was going through a lot of cuts, and there was a process called the Fit for the Future consultation, where they basically wanted to cut 900 staff.
Mm. I
was heavily involved with that. Really got me going with the TSSA. Really started to educate me about trade union politics. And thanks to the efforts of the TSSA and the RMT, we managed to win 600 of those jobs back. This really set alight my passion for trade unionism and left-wing politics. I was prior to that a Labour member, and really bought into the Corbyn project. Couldn't get enough of it. Came just at the right time because of all the the poverty I'd seen around the station, and all the social issues that were happening.
Yeah.
At the same time, the TSSA were hosting Jeremy's leadership bid, so we were quite heavily involved with that. Around 2019, I decided I wanted to change of pace. I was really electrified by my experience with the TSSA, and I decided to leave and applied for a job in Jeremy Corbyn's team. Carrie Murphy, who I have to give a lot of credit to, she brought me in. It was an absolute privilege working in Jeremy's office. I was only there for a short time. Absolute education for me, like I say, and really energised me some more. And I began to get involved with other groups, began to stand locally in my local Labour CLP.
Yeah, sure.
And it's really educational time, but I feel that TSA needs a change.
No, I think if you're going to have any sort of left credentials, working in the leader of the opposition's office under Jeremy Corbyn is pretty much going to be pretty high brownie points there. But you've clearly come up through your trade, so to speak, and been involved with your trade unionism, and you've just set out a brilliant case for the benefits of trade unionism with these fights to fight cuts and redundancies and all the rest of it. And just want to ask you a bit more about your time during working with Jeremy Corbyn in that office. And of course, I had the privilege of interviewing a couple of weeks ago Carrie Murphy. Funny you should mention her. But how did you find your time working there? What were the highs and lows, and what did you learn in your time there that you'd like to take forward if you win the TSSA presidency?
Well, the main thing I learned is there's not a lot of working class people in Westminster. Not a lot of people that worked on the tube. Not a lot of people that worked on the tube for 14 years. I can tell you that. No. Jeremy, as a man himself, he was incredibly good to me. He involved. We was probably unique in that office that we had so many. People that come from what I'd call normal jobs. We weren't. A lot of us weren't career employees that had been working in Westminster since we were 21. A couple of my colleagues that I worked alongside. We had me. I worked for the tube. A good friend of mine, Tom, he come through as a Sky, cold caller, I like to call him. We had a couple of librarians in there and some people that worked in Costa Coffee. We was all involved because we was all willing to get more trade unionists and more working class people into the leader of the opposition's office. Like I say, I can only thank Carrie Murphy for that, really, and Jeremy himself. I learned so much. He used to involve us with everything he possibly could. So he used to invite us in on our on the PMQ briefings, which I thought was absolutely eye-opening, to be frank. How the process works. It astounded me that I was sort of selling tickets on the underground sort of a year prior, and then I'm talking to the leader of the opposition and some shadow ministers about what should be in Prime Minister's questions.
Yeah.
I can only tell you that one thing I definitely learned was that more trade unions, there can't be enough trade unions, and there can't be enough working class people in Westminster. And taking that forward to the TSSA presidency, I can only say that we need to involve more grassroots members and more grassroots people into the process.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's one thing I have noticed through certainly recent interviews that I've been doing with various MPs, particularly. It's the working class ones that tend to be the ones that have come up from doing a hard day's graft, or have done a trade, so they've got their trade under their belt before they went into politics. They're the ones that didn't go into politics perhaps looking to ever actually do so. It just sort of happened to them accidentally, whether it's John Trickett, who was a brickie, or Ian Lavery, who was down the pits, yourself on the on the rails, on the tubes. It's very much is those ones that don't go looking for a political career that tend to end up being the best politicians. It's these ones that are careerists, and there is so few proper working class come from a trade MPs within the Labour Party. It's a shocking indictment of the party. It's little wonder Labour is quite often seen as a fairly middle class party these days because of the cut of many of these MPs' cloth. But it's great that we can have a potential candidate for the TSSA presidency who has definitely come up through his working class roots and through his trade to potentially have the highest office in your union. How are TSA members coping right now with the pandemic that we're still having to endure, frankly, with the mismanagement from the Tories that we've had? It's going on and on and on, of course. And the longer it goes on, the longer it affects many people working in whatever trade. But for TSSA members particularly, what have been the primary issues affecting them that the union have had to help them deal with, and what support have they been offered?
Well, transport workers have been at the front line as much as anybody else. My partner, she's a train driver. She hasn't had any time off. She's been driving her train throughout the whole of the pandemic, as everyone else has. We've, from the ones I speak to, they're incredibly exposed. And they're doing a fantastic job getting people to their to where they've got to go. Other essential workers like nurses and doctors and cleaners, even the cleaning team at some of these stations and some of these bus depots, they're doing an absolutely fantastic job in fighting the coronavirus.
Yeah.
My own employers, we heard a report a couple of months ago that just under 60 people had died in TfL, including some of my former colleagues, unfortunately, who I knew well. And it's an incredibly difficult time for transport workers. And down in Victoria, we lost one of our members, Belly Majinga. She had an interaction with somebody down in Victoria Concourse, and she caught coronavirus and she died. Incredibly sad that TSA members are dying. We're suffering as much as anybody, and it's really important that the president of the TSSA, whoever wins it, pushes, if coronavirus is still an issue in the summer, for transport workers to receive some consideration in regards to that priority list of vaccinations, if that's still going on then. I don't think anyone's suggesting that transport workers should leapfrog ahead of medical workers or doctors or nurses, but we should certainly be in the conversation.
Well, as you say, your transport workers have been carrying on working throughout this pandemic. They have kept the country moving, literally. And it's nice actually that you brought up the subject of cleaners, because they're so often they're forgotten, and no matter what trade union it is, what job there is, there's always cleaners involved, and bless them, they're union members as well. But the fatality stats for transport workers, and Belly was a very high profile case, are condemnable. It's clear that they haven't had the support needed there, just like many other professions, like the health professionals. Teachers are getting a lot of, and school staff are getting a lot of attention at the moment as well, obviously with the free for all there is over whether to open or close schools, for example. But transport workers are right up there as well. I mean, yeah, absolutely, it's very, very important that they do get prioritised. What are the biggest issues right now, as you see them within the TSSA? I know you've brought out your own manifesto, but what are the greatest challenges you'd face as incoming president? And having identified these, what would your priorities be should you be successful?
So I've been incredibly active, sort of formally and informally, with TSSA. I really bought into it, during my time with the underground. I just found that trying to get changes done as a lay member was, just incredibly difficult. I had a very active branch, but even they was, very limited about what they can actually push through to the TSSA hierarchy. The main thing I want to do with the TSA is expand the democracy as much as I can. Yep. So, I appreciate this coming from, a straight white male here, but there's not very much diversity on our executive committee. Is the way I see it, and we have a lot of really well organised groups, such as our disability working group. We, in my opinion, are the most organised group in the TSSA. We have a women's focus group as well, and LGBT, as well as our BAME groups, and these people need real power and a real voice on our EC. The EC is where changes in TSA happen. These are where the rules are made. This is where policy is discussed, and unfortunately, I just don't think they're represented on the CC. I mean, even the fact, like I say, that I'm certainly not a minority by any stretch of the imagination, but the fact that I'm the only person standing, it's indicative, really, that these groups aren't really encouraged to stand for positions or have the opportunity to do it, or make changes for themselves and make changes for unions for them. So that's my main thing, yeah. And I'm very aware of what's going on in other unions, such as the GMB. There's a lot of bullying and a few issues with behaviour of staff and behaviour of members, and I wouldn't want to see the TSSA have a similar thing happen to them. So I think it's really important, if I was elected as president, that I would put as a priority that we start any new period under a clean slate, free from anything like that hanging over us.
Yeah, a clean slate, a code of conduct, perhaps, essentially, really. Just for going forwards under your leadership, there must be certain rules that abide by. I don't apologise for being born white either. I mean, ultimately, it's gonna take somebody. I mean, if the union is lacking in diversity, as you've alluded to, it's going to take somebody to just say, look, this has got to change. We need X number of positions on our executive committee, for example, and we need to have so many people from a BAME background or an LGBT disability. I think disability is extremely important to me. I'm a carer for 2 disabled people, so yeah, it's a given these days. These demographics must be represented. So that can only be to the good of the union. And I think no matter who were to win the union presidency, I think that would be a very important thing to take forward from your manifesto, even if it's not yourself that's actually pushing for it. And expanding democracy, of course, is something that was very much at the forefront of Jeremy Corbyn's mind. I'm sure this is something that you've seen the benefits for whilst you were working in that Leader of the Opposition's office. And taking that forward to the TSSA, it can only be a benefit. Once you have people that want to engage, how many members joined Labour after all for what Jeremy Corbyn was offering? If you're offering a similar thing to the TSSA, I would hope there would be a great many more transport workers who would choose to then be unionised and to grow the union and make it that much more powerful, essentially, because it's collectivism ultimately that gives it its power. There are some trade unionists, however, that they like to be involved in the political side of things, and there are others who perhaps feel less inclined to. And you've obviously, as I've just talked about, you've worked in that political side of things. Do you favour one viewpoint over another, or do you think there's a happy medium to be struck here, perhaps? And is that viewpoint influenced by how the Labour Party is run today versus when you were working in it?
My TSA did nominate Keir Starmer for leader. I absolutely respect democracy, and it's essential and give to TSSA its due, including its current president. That was a question that was put to all our members, and I totally respect that, even though it wasn't my vote and it wasn't my choice. But I think I would, well, I'd certainly hope anyway. I'd hope that a lot of TSSA members would see how the Labour Party is treating trade unions at the moment, and there's a lot of figures flying around about how trade union donations, especially from Unite, have diminished under Starmer. It's essential that we speak to everybody and keep everyone involved. But I think a little reminder for the Labour Party is, we are the party of trade unions. We were formed by trade unions. We are trade unions. Trade unions there before the Labour Party were, that's for sure. I think I think a little reminder of that fact. Going to Keir Starmer would absolutely move him in the right direction.
He would benefit from it. I mean, like you said, Unite cut their contributions to the party under Starmer as a sort of a telling off, I suppose, a warning, just change your ways a bit. It clearly hasn't worked. I mean, is this the sort of thing that you would look at doing, or even disaffiliation, God forbid? Is this how far would you be prepared to perhaps take things if things don't change?
Well, as president, I certainly wouldn't want to disaffiliate from the Labour Party. And the TSSA and the Labour Party have both benefited from that partnership, even through through the Blair years, and through Corbyn, it's been the same. Personally, while I do have my disappointments with the Labour Party, I would like to see TSSA as a critical friend of this current Labour administration. One of our strengths as the TSA is that we are affiliated, alongside ASLEF, the other, transport union that are affiliated. Sure. And, we do things that perhaps the RMT can't because of that affiliation. I mean, I'm not having to go at the RMT by any stretch, but no, I wouldn't be calling for disaffiliation, but, I'd be using TSSA's voice on the EC, and I'd be using TSSA's voice, with the trade union, department of Keir's office to, make our points clear. Trade unions need to be heard. Trade unions need to be at the forefront of any conversation you have, around, your manifesto. And we are incredibly important. Jeremy's office was really, really good at doing that. And, we had a manifesto, really, really pro-worker manifesto. And, that was down to the input of trade unions.
Absolutely. I mean, Labour needs to remember they are the political arm of the trade union movement.
Really?
I say it quite often on my shows. And, it's without trade unionism, the Labour Party simply wouldn't exist. So to turn your back or ignore what the unions are saying is cutting your nose off to spite your face. This is who you're supposed to represent, and the workers that they represent. This is who you're supposed to be, fighting for. And I think so often it is forgotten when people look at Labour, and they, as I said, it's been just, you look at so many on that front bench or even on the back benches, and there's so many people who have come into that role who haven't really done anything else, who've done their degree in politics or what have you else, and haven't ever grafted. There's the builders, the welders, the train drivers, they're gone for the most part, and they do need to return. Working class roots is what the Labour Party was founded on, and I think to a large extent they're forgotten. And the trade unions, absolutely keep reminding them of that. That is a crucial role, I think. Trade unions are still to this day attacked by the media, the right wing, still painted as militant picketers who just want to go on strike, who just want to obstruct. We had a former BBC presenter refer to the NEU as hard left this morning on social media for wanting to go further than just vaccinating school staff as part of a COVID strategy. How do you propose to challenge such views as a trade union leader and encourage more people to not see the unions as detrimental, but as a force for good to defend their rights at work?
Well, let's be honest, Genghis Khan is to the far left of Andrew Neil, isn't he? So, you can't do anything with Andrew Neil, except, if I was elected, I would work, I'd work really collaboratively with as many unions as I can, including the other transport unions, the RMT and ASLEF. We've got to be a unified voice, really. As president, I could probably, I wouldn't be bogged down with the bureaucracy in the same way that perhaps the General Secretary would. I'd absolutely work with all the other unions, including the NEU, who I thought were, terribly maligned
They have been, really.
I mean, to be honest, I mean, they're keeping our children safe. Effectively, this is our children that they're looking after.
That's it.
I know reps in the NEU, and no, they're not hard left. They're not Maoists or anything like that. They are, just really conscientious workers, and they are essential. They've been hit harder than anybody by this pandemic. But yeah, I'd speak to anybody in the trade union movement, and I can only encourage collaboration. Really, I think the trade union has done so much. It's been around a lot longer than a lot of the print media. To be honest, we've got 300 years worth of trade union history in this country. It's going to continue. We need to work together, and we need to tell the government and tell a lot of these right-wing media types, we're here for you as well as everyone else, basically. And I can only encourage people to look at alternative media as well. Things like Socialist Telly, for example. Or, there's so many alternatives nowadays. There's no excuse.
No, that's right. That's right. It's an interesting time, isn't it? This rise of alternative media. I mean, we are one fairly new outlet. There's a few that have been going a lot longer than us. Notable ones like Squawk Box, Canary, Navara. Just if the unions came to us or anyone, quite frankly, wanting a fair deal, who is not getting heard fairly in the mainstream media, then by all means speak to alternatives, because we will present your cases, and we do have a lot of people paying attention to us these days. We're as surprised as anyone else as to how many people actually want to come on and listen to us, but they do. And I think it's because there is this appetite for change and something different, and to actually have some honest, straightforward talking for a change. So yeah, fair play to you for giving us a nod, and obviously we're more than happy to host yourself today. We feel quite privileged to be hosting yourself today and helping you to present your pitch to the union and its members. And so what should I say? There will be no doubt others are going to be vying for this presidency as well. You're not going to walk into it. There are other contenders as well. What sets you apart? What makes you the ideal candidate?
So the main thing, and I know this is a very vague term, is change. I mean, change is bandied about in politics a lot, bandied about in trade union circles a lot. But, at the moment, it's me and the incumbent. This may change. There's still 3 weeks left on the nomination process. But by my calculation, there's been, 5 people occupying the treasurer and the president positions for, 20 years now. And it's, I don't believe in coronations. I believe in offering out, I believe in offering out, your values and, your manifesto, and people vote on that. I don't think, just because you've occupied a position for so long and nothing's changed, I don't think that entitles you to another term. In terms of the difference between me and the incumbent, like I mentioned earlier, it's about expanding democracy for me. And, it's about getting people involved with the trade unions as well. So, in terms of specific policy, I would ensure that the EC meetings, for example, are open to any member. So there's no, cloak and dagger, stuff going on. Everyone's accountable for what they say. And, we are, like every other trade union, we do have an older membership than the working population in general. So I want to get young people involved. I mean, it's incredible to me. I'm 35 years old, and, I'm still eligible for the young, young trade unionist group in our union. We have some excellent young activists who just basically need access to the machinery, access to how things are done, and that's just not happening right now. I mean, I've seen some really progressive motions put up at conference over previous years, including changes to our constitution, which would involve, young trade unionists, in our union, and just, like I say, some of the groups I mentioned earlier. But I want to expand that democracy, and I want to be a president that doesn't just look at, potentially another term for myself. I want to look for getting the next, many candidates to stand, because, 2 candidates in a trade union isn't healthy. There should be as many as possible, really.
Yeah.
And like I say, I was quite late to this race, to be honest. This has been open since October, but I don't feel that people are encouraged to stand by any means. And if I win the presidency, that would be my first job, is getting looking to another 2 years, which is when the term would end. And if we get as many candidates as possible to stand, have a real variety of discussion and debate in our union.
Yeah. reinvigorate the union. I mean,
Absolutely.
you mentioned that you've struggling to get younger people to join, but when you've got people that are holding on to the post, as you said, for like 20 years, I mean, where is the democracy in that? How can somebody possibly hold that sort of position? And it's clear that, well, I don't suppose whether it's clear or not, but younger people may perhaps see unionism as being a bit dusty and for the older members, given that the older members seem to be running it and it's the same old faces sitting in the same old seats. I mean, you do need to inject a bit of life into the thing to keep it going, and not keep it on life support, which is the impression that I'm sure a lot of them are getting. So, is it fair to say that the union is seen as a bit dusty, maybe?
Well, I've got to be clear. It hasn't been the same candidate the same president for 20 years, but it's the same 3 or 4 names basically, and they all swap around positions. So, there's a tradition in the TSSA that to be a president, you need to have stood on the EC and then as treasurer and then to become president. Now, it's not a conveyor belt for 3 or 4 people. But yeah, absolutely. That's how I saw the trade unions when I was young. And it was only until sort of somebody came up to me and put a form in my hand, really, that I knew what was going on. And don't get me wrong, there's an incredible amount of experience with our older members. Of course there is. I mean, we have really, really active retired branches who do an absolute credit to the union. Yeah. But they're not going to be running the union, during the hard times in 20 years or longer. And we need to start bringing people in, because younger people, they're as affected by working, as workplace issues as anybody, and we need to give them tools to help themselves. And when we're not around, it's absolutely essential. I mean, I know we get these figures from the government about how great employment is, especially prior to COVID. But these are people on 2 or 3 jobs, very insecure work. It's the gig economy basically that's holding up those statistics. And young people, and especially in the transport industry, travel and transport industry, we need to start bringing people in that are unionised, so they can start fighting for the rights in the same way that I did, in the same way that my predecessors did. Yeah, unions will die without young members. Yeah, well, some openness, some transparency to lift this veil of mystery that may cloak the eyes of some members, particularly younger ones, is good. And change is good as well, because it's the same sort of few people taking turns doing different roles. I mean, surely there's going to be a lot of TSSA members that would be looking forward to a little bit of change as well, and breathing new life into it. And it's interesting you bring in the employment figures as well, because I mean, never have figures been fiddled quite like it by this government. It's always something they crow about, but splitting one job between 3 or 4 people is not making jobs. It's a con, it's a fudge, and that absolutely does have to end. We'll bring this interview to an end as well, funnily enough. This is your final question, Barry. And it's the same question I threw at Howard Beckett way back when as well. Let's say you've won the presidency. What does your first day look like? So first day for me, would be like any trade union official or president or person should be going into the workplaces to speak to workers. I don't think that happens enough, to be honest, in my trade union or others. We have full-time officers do a fantastic job, but it shouldn't be left to just them. I mean, lay members, as I would be as a president, because it's not, it's certainly not a paid position. We need to be in the workplace, encouraging people to join, promoting our campaigns. That would be my absolute priority. And, I'd want to get some sort of democratic review going as well as to, how we can expand involvement with the TSSA. Brilliant. Barry James, it's been an absolute pleasure to listen to you tonight, to highlight your candidacy for this key trade union role. You sound absolutely brilliant. You sound like you've got all the right ideas. And I wish you the very best of luck in the world on behalf of all of us here at Socialist Telly. And of course, thank you for coming to us and supporting alternative media. And I hope you will come back to talk to us again in the future, hopefully as a newly incumbent TSSA president. Thank you very much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.